Even with the Jade Talisman in hand, command over every province's incense faith power, Yang Shangxiang couldn't forget what Songzhou had lost. 4 commanderies gone. A pittance of faith remained.
Spend it on himself, High Marshal Valerius, or on that stranger Neichi's Zhou. What possible good could it do?
Songzhou had paid with countless lives merely to hold the 2 demon kings in check. Destruction loomed. Yes, but there was still a little time. For men like them, every extra day was another chance for Lord Chen to return. Why then would anyone willingly shatter the standstill?
Consult. When the Imperial Inspector acts, why would he need to consult you or me?
Zhang Xuan gritted his teeth and drew a skull from his robes.
At the very least, next Zhou helped me bring him back. I cannot bring myself to stand in his way.
His eyes went hard as a whetted blade.
Please do not hesitate, High Marshal Valerius. The Inspector is still trapped in the demon horde at Nanyue Commandery. Dispatch the devil-suppressing general and the Golden Bell demon hunters at once and follow me to reinforce him.
Yang Changxiang yanked at his sparse hair twice, then turned and sighed to the deputy general behind him.
Pass my order. Have them muster toward the 4 lost commanderies as quickly as possible.
With a wooden face, he swung onto the demon steed.
Lead the way.
You won't send your Yin Spirit?
Zhang Xuan was taken aback.
Since when did a High Marshal of the 9 provinces venture into mortal danger in the flesh?
What would be the point?
Yang Changxiang looked at him sidelong. His gaunt face held not a shred of emotion. Songzhou had already done everything it could. He was only a martial immortal, not a true deity. He could not possibly take on 2 demon kings, both of whom surpassed him by a wide margin, all at once.
And perhaps this was for the best. The Imperial Inspector had made the decision for Songzhou. No need for this old wreck to agonize any further. As for offending the Crimson Eye Demon King, drawing its attention away from the other Demon King and back onto the Songzhou Demon Suppression Division, it was already done. No use mulling it over now.
See that this old friend is kept safe.
Zhang Xuan handed the skull to the deputy general with great care. The next moment, the black-scaled demon steed surged into the sky, bearing both men away from Songzhou City.
Is this not the road to Nanyue City?
Yang Changxiang felt a prickle of wrongness.
Neichi's Zhou should have already gone down to the county towns.
Zhang Xuan kept his voice low. From what they had seen inside the city earlier, that young Imperial Inspector only seemed cold and reserved. In truth, his thoughts were as fine as silk, and he cared just as much for the common folk.
Just what in the world did you bring back?
Yang Changxiang's brows drew tight, and at last he could not hold back the complaint. For a Yin Spirit cultivator to charge alone into a commandery city, occupied by fiends, with no one at his side to guard his flesh, there was no greater peril.
Nature's Zhou, Shen said he knows a little of body tempering.
Zhang Xuan was equally anxious, but he offered the words as a balm. He did not know exactly how much a little meant, but the man was not the reckless sort.
In all the years I have held Songzhou, I have never once behaved rashly.
Yang Changxiang gave a self-deprecating laugh.
And the first time I do, it will cost me the other half of Songzhou.
The black-scaled demon steed galloped with all its strength, no slower than the void step art. Before long, the 2 arrived above a county town. Yang Changxiang lowered his gaze. It had been a long time since he had dared to look directly upon the 4 lost commanderies, not even with his Yin Spirit. When the cities had fallen back then, the dead had lain strewn across the fields, and countless young men in ink-black robes had collapsed beneath the feet of his Yin Spirit. Even now, the screaming still echoed in his ears. He took in the scene below. His expression shifted. The streets were packed with people, all running in wild abandon, some weeping and laughing at once, some kneeling and pounding the earth, some shrieking at nothing, and yet, as far as the eye could see, not a single fiend. The 2 men exchanged a glance, smothered their unease, and spurred their mounts onward elsewhere. At one point, they even split up to search separately. When they rejoined, the shock in their eyes could no longer be concealed.
Something is wrong. Something is wrong.
Everywhere they had passed, there were no fiends at all, not even corpses. If the creatures had been slain, that was plainly the work of a manifested Yin Spirit.
Neichi's Zhou unleashed his Yin Spirit out here.
Zhang Xuan's composure cracked. He could not fathom why the man would take such a risk. Soren, who had come from Wangcheng, a disciple of the martial temple, was somehow more desperate than the local agents of the Demon Suppression Division.
What I fear.
Yang Chengsheng swallowed hard.
Is that if he is this desperate, where would he go now? The Crimson Eye Divine Lord's Temple.
Within the 4 lost commanderies, every county town had a shrine to the Crimson Eye Divine Lord. But the place they meant was where the Demon King truly dwelled. At the very center of the 4 commanderies, a crude stone statue had been carved into the sheer cliff face, a dozen odd jang tall. A beast-faced, human-bodied figure, wearing a feathered helm and fish-scale armor. It sat within the mountain, a long lance in its left hand, its right hand resting flat on its knee. Its gaze fixed on Songzhou city. Its feet were planted on the ground, ringed by dense rows of incense altars. Thick smoke coiled upward like an auspicious cloud gathering beneath its soles. Behind the statue gaped a cavern that rose just as high. From its depths came breathing like thunder, sending faint tremors through the entire mountain. The townsfolk drifting past seemed long accustomed to the sight. They walked expressionlessly to the statue's feet, lit incense, and prostrated themselves. No reverence shone in their eyes, yet every motion was precise, as if rehearsed 1,000 times over, not daring a single flaw. A band of red clouds streaked across the sky. A figure in ink-black robes appeared soundlessly among the crowd. The young man walked unhurriedly toward the stone statue. Among the kneeling worshippers, his tall, straight silhouette was starkly incongruous. Many noticed him. Their prostrations faltered. Terror seeped onto their faces. Soren reached the dense rows of incense altars. He bent down, scooped up a handful of ash, and calmly raised his eyes to the towering idol. He gave a slight nod. At his side, the fully corporeal Yin Spirit, Lady Qing, waved a hand. With an invisible surge of incense faith power, she pushed the bewildered crowd back dozens of jang. Then Lady Qing withdrew into Soren's qi. A crack split the air. The next instant, he launched himself upward, driving one foot into the statue's chest. The towering idol split apart from the shins and came thundering down against the cavern behind it. Amid the roar of collapse, Soren's figure vanished. The thunderous breathing within the cavern snapped into silence. Then came a bellow of pure, rabid rage.
Roar!
And within a single breath, even that roar was cut short. The black-robed youth shot out of the cavern, dragged the enormous silhouette out with brute force, and hurled it against the mountain. Beneath the dull crunch, a ghastly rift split open across the ridgeline. Rubble burst outward, the earth cracked apart. The bulky form splayed on the ground had nothing to do with the divine statue. It was a black bear demon, its pelt gleaming like oiled silk. It staggered upright and shook the sky with a roar. That feral bellow came from pure rage, not pain. The impact that could sunder a mountain's spine had only stoked the beast's ferocity.
Damned wretch! You dare destroy this lord's divine statue!
The red-eyed Demon King had presided over Songzhou for years without suffering such humiliation. He had been comfortably soaking in the worship of incense, half dozing, when someone grabbed him and ripped him out by the scruff.
Martial Immortal, or Grandmaster.
He stared at the figure above, a youth standing on demonic clouds, bearing neither the aura of a Yin Spirit nor a Tao infant. The bear narrowed its eyes.
Where are you fiends from? Did that old white rhino hire you to back him up?
He had known the old rhino was on his last legs and had planned to go settle the matter himself. He hadn't expected the rhino to call in outside help first. Soren arched an eyebrow, his gaze sharpening with cold intent. The wandering wind art unused for so long unfurled at last. He materialized behind the bear, his long fingers sinking into the layered folds of the creature's neck, his arm powered up. The great demon, several jang tall, had only a moment to look bewildered before its entire body was swung through the air and slammed into a jagged mountain pinnacle. A cracking thud, the whole peak crumbled beneath its fat spine.
What enormous strength!
The bear's head spun. It had barely raised its neck when a vicious straight punch smashed into its snout. Its massive skull crashed back into the ground. Soren drew his sabre casually, waited for the creature's opening, and slashed the black misted blade at its throat in a horizontal arc. Clang! The moment the abyssal deep sabre descended, a long lance condensed into existence in the bear's paw. Heaving with both arms, it caught the blade on the lance shaft. Blood from its nose streaked its savage muzzle. It bared its fangs, muscles bulging along its arms. The scene looked like a dagger pressing into a tree trunk, except the lance was being pushed down, inch by inch. Strange, the very armor that had saved the young fiend king's life hung in sheared halves, sliced clean through by that saber. Yet the lance shaft bore not so much as a white scar. Soren paused for a beat. Then he yanked the sabre free and clamped the lance shaft under his arm. A roar tore out of the bear. Its weapon was slipping from its grip. The beast clutched with everything it had, watching its claws slide, one finger at a time, until Soren shifted his weight, pulled, and ripped the lance clean away. Thud. Asterisk. He dropped a few jang, planted a boot into the bear's flank, and with monstrous strength kicked the colossal body flying dozens of jang, sending it tumbling off the mountain. The lance spun into the air. Soren's robes flared as he turned, caught it with a second kick, and sent it shooting like a bolt from a ballista, straight at the bear's heart. A high, splitting shriek tore through the sky. The two demon steeds that had just arrived shied and reared, nearly throwing both riders.
What the?
Zhang Xuan settled his dragon, steed, and his first sight was the patrol envoy booting the Demon King across the mountainside.
Martial Temple Disciple, Yin Spirit Cultivator.
Yang Xiangxiang's eyes twitched. He turned to the devil, suppressing general beside him.
What kind of Yin Spirit Cultivator can throw a massive Demon King around, like a bale of straw? But truly, he hadn't sensed so much as a wisp of Dao infant aura.
Zhang Xuan had no time to explain. All his attention was fixed on the flying lance. It hurtled with unstoppable momentum and struck the bear square in the chest. Yet there was no wet sound of piercing flesh. Instead, like snow meeting blazing iron, the lance dissolved on contact. Boom, 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 asterisk. The bear plowed through the great trees on the cliff face, tumbling down the mountain like a boulder of black stone, every collision spitting a dense web of cracks. At last it drove a palm through the rock wall, stopping itself before the base. When it raised its head again, its pitch-black pupils were drowned in blood red. The tips of its fur reddened, as if fire had ignited across its body. Invisible incense faith power converged upon it, condensing into a suit of fish, scale armor drenched in gemmed light. An ornate feathered helmet crowned its skull. The lance reappeared in its paw with a casual clench. The bloated bear was gone. In its place stood a radiant, awe-inspiring divine general rising into the sky, smoke coiling beneath its feet.
Wherever you fiends crawled out from, dare to invade this lord's domain, and you will be brought to justice here today.
Crimson eyes glared down at the youth. The voice boomed like a great bronze bell. It leveled the gleaming lance head.
Evil beast, accept your death.
Lord Red Eye had manifested his divine might. In the far distance, commoners who had long since collapsed in fear scrambled to their knees and pressed their foreheads hard against the ground. Zhang Xuan and Yang Xiang swung off their horses and stood among the crowd, complicated expressions on their faces. If this red-eyed Demon King were given a few more years, he might truly raise his own temple and be canonized as a god. Meanwhile, it was the Demon Suppression Division's own patrol envoy who had been branded a fiend.
Guard me.
Yang Xiangxiang wasted no breath. He sat down cross-legged at once, and his Yin Spirit floated out of his body, the self-mockery in his eyes deepening a shade further.
Laughable, really. Here he was, right in the middle of Songzhou. Yet he couldn't stir a single thread of the incense faith that filled the sky. To think the common folk had been driven to such despair over the Demon Suppression Division. And what a useless, derelict High Marshal Valerius he had become. Patrol Envoy! Yang has come to aid you!
With a deep cry, he charged at the red-eyed Demon King in the sky, but the black-robed figure was swifter by far. Soren stepped into the air. The instant the lance thrust toward him, he smashed his fist against it. The red-eyed Demon King sneered. With the boost from his innate divine ability, his power had exploded to a level nothing like before, only for another dull thud to ring out. His lance was sent flying. Both paws went numb. The bear stared up in disbelief at the lance spinning through the sky. Before it could react, Soren's heavy leg crashed down like a falling pillar onto its head. The feathered helmet forged of incense faith power shattered in a burst of light. With a crack, the bear's skull split, and its body plummeted helplessly toward the earth. Yang Xiangxiang had only just floated into the air when he saw Soren already diving down after it. That frame beneath the black robe seemed to contain power without end. Soren seized the bear fiend by the face, wrenched its head up, and drove his right fist into its eye socket without hesitation. The fiend's bone, hard as iron, cracked like bamboo slivers under that punch. A crunch shards flew, and the scarlet eyeball burst along with it. After capturing the Howling Moon, Fiend King, and feeding the Flood Dragon Immortal with demon blood, until it reached Demon King level, Soren's physical strength alone now far exceeded what ordinary fiends could withstand. One punch sent the bear fiend's head plowing into the mountain rock. He yanked it out and hammered another fist down.
This lord! I am the divine lord! You cursed beast!
The old bear's eyes were already ruined, and in that agony it thrashed wildly, trying to scramble upright. But every time it rose, Soren lashed out with a whip kick and slammed it back to the ground. Fists fell like a storm.
Louder. Can't hear you.
At that flat voice beside its ear, the black bear opened its maw wide.
I am.
Beneath the ink-black sleeve, a pale arm punched straight through its jaw, then smashed its tongue to pulp.
You are what?
Graph!
The bear gave a strangled howl. The arm pulled back, whipped out again, and shattered half its skull. It was the red-eyed divine lord. Once it had worn magnificent armor, its fur blazing red, as imposing as a heavenly general. Now it could only lie pinned to the ground, unable even to rise. Soren used nothing else. He never even touched the abyssal deep sabre at his waist. His fists did not stop for an instant. Only when his arms went numb and his whole body was splattered with thick blood did he slowly straighten up from the bear carcass. The entire mountain was shuddering, on the verge of crumbling apart. His drenched ink robe came into view of everyone below. Standing atop the colossal bear corpse, the young man looked small, yet the pressure he exuded stole the breath from every throat. He was silent for a moment, staring at the corpse beneath his feet. Then he waved a hand, stored it into a storage treasure, and turned to walk down the mountain.
This.
Yang Qiangshang floated in midair.
When the time had come to slay demons, he'd felt he had no opening to intervene. And now that the fiends were dead, he was even more stunned. A martial temple disciple. A Yin Spirit cultivator. Where was the Yin Spirit? All he had seen was a humanoid fiend. Appalling, efficient, smashing the red-eyed Demon King's skull into a pulp of bone and flesh. That red-eyed great fiend had once dominated the region, holding down both the Demon Suppression Division and another Demon King. Truly dominant and ferocious, yet in the Lord Inspector's hands, it had been like a child utterly unable to resist. It was enough to suffocate any onlooker.
At the foot of the mountain, toppled stone statues and overturned incense burners lay scattered among broken timber and rubble, a scene of utter chaos. Soren walked over to the gathered crowd, and a thick stench of blood spread around him.
Lord Inspector!
Zhang Xuan knelt on one knee, both fists cupped in salute, trembling all over with excitement.
That scene had completely shattered his preconceptions about Yin Spirit cultivators. So it wasn't only primordial chaos grandmasters who could patrol the 9 provinces. As long as one also cultivated body forging techniques, a martial immortal could do the same. Given the inspector's performance just now, Zhang Xuan even suspected that a primordial chaos realm expert might not be a match for the inspector in physical combat.
Ha, ha! The commoners pressed their foreheads into the dirt, shivering, lacking even the courage to look up. The earth-shaking scene just now was no different from the legendary battles between immortals. The red-eyed divine lord, who had demanded their worship day and night, had left them only screams and howls. Then the middle-aged man in profound armor knelt to the ground. The title of inspector was not something ordinary people could approach, but as residents of Songzhou, how could they not recognize the profound armor and red cape they had yearned for all this time? And now that devil-suppressing general was bowing to the young man with the utmost reverence. The people of the 4 commanderies had long abandoned vain fantasies. After watching their kin and friends dragged into the kitchen, then served onto the table, while the cloud-patterned ink-robed figures never once appeared, they had finally faced reality. Now, had these lords truly come back? Soren nodded for the man to rise. Even Lady Qing, with all her experience, could not manage everything perfectly. The current Yin Spirit was too powerful, too difficult for her to control, and without incense faith power to sustain it, she could not remain out in the world indefinitely. At his words, the people lying on the ground felt a sudden weakness wash over them. Their arms could barely support their limp bodies, and had it not been for the sharp stench of blood in the air, more than a few would have broken into sobs. This wasn't a new fiend incursion. The visitor was a true lord of the Demon Suppression Division, come to retake the cities the fiends had seized. Zhang Xuan fared little better than the common folk.
Clean up again. Did that mean the inspector had already made his rounds through all 4 remaining commanderies and their 100-odd county towns? This subordinate obeys.
He swallowed his shock and hastily clasped his hands. Beside him, Yangxiang slowly opened his eyes. He rose on trembling limbs, his gaunt frame making him look like a man already at the end of his years.
Songzhou High Marshal Valerius Yang Qiangshang pays respects to the Lord Inspector.
He bowed deeply, then dropped heavily to his knees.
Qiangshang was incompetent in defending the region. Please punish me, Lord Inspector.
The demon calamity had been resolved with such casual ease that beyond his excitement, Yang Xiang couldn't help a stab of sorrow.
He had spent all his days trying to break through to mid-stage Martial Immortal. Had he used that wasted time cultivating body forging instead, perhaps Songzhou would never have fallen to such a state.
That is none of my concern.
Soren shook his head. He had joined the Demon Suppression Division less than a year ago and didn't understand its internal rules of reward and punishment. What he didn't understand, he left to those who did.
And from his own perspective, Jiang Yian had nearly lost the entire Azure province while facing 2 demon kings. This old man, weaker than Jiang Yian, had at least managed to hold half of Songzhou. That could hardly be called dereliction. Go handle your duties. While you are at it, gather the demon hunters and compile the intelligence on the other demon king. I'll come pick it up shortly.
Soren mounted a demon cloud once more. Songzhou's demon calamity was over, but his own business was far from finished.
This subordinate understands.
Yang Xiangxiang looked up, dazed. A suspicion began to take root in his mind.
Nechastroshen wasn't here to inspect Songzhou. The man had shown almost no interest in how the local Demon Suppression Division managed its affairs.
He could only watch as Soren departed on his cloud. A long moment passed before Yang Xiang finally looked away and turned to the agitated Zhang Xuan.
You call this a slight understanding of body tempering?
Zhang Xuan's mouth twitched.
How was he supposed to know that Nechastroshen would be that modest? After working alongside the man for so long, he had never realized that this demon suppression general of theirs had this much nerve.
Soren rode his cloud to a desolate hillside. A mountain of flesh rose before his eyes, heaps of fiend corpses stacked one on top of another. According to Qing's report, Songzhou's prefectural seat wasn't particularly large. 4 commanderies, 102 county towns in total. Altogether, they had cut down 636 fiends. Even a dimensional pocket treasure couldn't hold that many bodies, so they had been temporarily stockpiled here. Unlike the Howling Moon Fiend King of Azure Province, who had brought only a dozen or so demon lords, the red-eyed demon king had clearly carved out his territory and made a name for himself. Nearly 1,000 fiends had flocked to offer their allegiance. Even so, that still amounted to only 6 or 7 fiends per county town, and that was enough to hold an entire county in terror. Of those, roughly 60% were sentient fiends, more than 100 at the initial realm, dozens at the Jade Liquid realm, and 16 at core formation. And this was the aftermath of a brutal clash against both the Demon Suppression Division and another Demon King. After all that, such an overwhelming force still remained. A single lesser fiend at the Jade Liquid realm could leave over 100,000 people utterly powerless. A core formation fiend could sit in the county magistrate's office and frighten the martial artists of a dozen neighboring counties out of even daring to flee. The suffocating oppression hanging over Songzhou was hardly baseless. Countless lives must have been used as warnings, shattering the courage of its people and grinding them down into what they were today. Soren let out a breath. When he had seen that head impaled on a spear at the gate of the Demon Suppression General's mansion, he had suddenly thought of the Sovereign General. He was not a sentimental man, but after witnessing what had happened in Songzhou, he still felt a faint ache in his chest. What was more absurd was that, among fiends, the red-eyed Demon King's eating habits could already be considered merciful. He fed on incense faith power rather than fresh flesh and blood, merely having his underlings eat on a fixed schedule while keeping the common folk in a state of constant, life-threatening dread. Had it been someone who favored a more direct approach, Songzhou would never have survived to this day. It would have been devoured clean long ago. He was, in the end, still a small man. Even with power beyond mortal imagination, he could not achieve the untroubled stillness of a martial temple master, one who treated the world as a chessboard and viewed the slaughter of living beings as nothing more than moving pieces. During his earlier fight with the red-eyed Demon King, every punch he threw had felt like a return to 6 Mile Temple Village, driving that steel blade into the Gaoyao's chest again and again as he vented the trace of fury within him. Soren shook his head and quickly composed himself. His gaze turned cold. He opened his mouth, and the towering mountain of flesh collapsed into a river of blood. 600 or 700 hideous fiends rapidly shriveled into dry husks as the blood pooled in midair, visibly condensing into demonic blood. What had blazed red across the sky gradually darkened, until only 4 drops of demon blood remained. They darted into Soren's mouth, not even enough to sustain a single all-out exchange at the Tao infant level. But their true worth did not lie there. Soren lifted his eyes to the panel. The absurd figure made even his heartbeat quicken.
Remaining fiend lifespan, 94,600 years.
Of that total, only the 11,000 years from the 4-core formation, Demon Lords, and the 7,000 years from the Red-Eyed Demon King had been personally claimed by Soren. The rest was entirely Lady Qing's handiwork. Soren summoned her soul. A woman in a long green robe appeared beside him, drifting lightly in the air.
Search the edges of Songzhou again. See if any slip through the net.
Qing obeys my lord's decree.
Her face was pallid, yet she voiced no objection. She bowed respectfully, withdrew into the Yin Spirit, and drifted away into the distance. Soren pocketed the beast essences and fiend cores scattered across the ground, then picked the corpses of the 4-core formation Demon Lords and the Red-Eyed Demon King from the heap. Once more, he activated the blood refinement art. After a moment, 23 drops of demon blood floated out from the 4 Demon Lords. Judging by the quantity, their strength was only slightly inferior to that of the young Fiend King. Those who had survived the carnage had real skill. The Red-Eyed Demon King, however, left Soren rather disappointed. 57 drops in total, nowhere near Lady Qing's yield.
Huh?
Beneath the hollow husk of the black bear lay a dark wooden box. Soren swallowed the demon blood, waved a hand to lift the box, and opened it to find neatly arranged envelopes inside. He opened and read them one by one. All the letters came from the same faction, and their contents were strikingly uniform, almost entirely answers to questions about cultivation techniques. The signature at the end belonged to a faction Soren knew well, Songzhou. In the letters, they referred to the Red-Eyed Demon King as a revered elder. After he had taken out all the letters, a thick cultivation manual lay at the bottom. Soren opened the manual and quickly skimmed its contents. A moment later, a new line appeared on his panel.
Martial Immortal. Myriad Phenomena Divine Cultivation Art. Uninitiated.
He recalled the divine armor and weapons that had condensed around the black bear earlier. Formless incense faith power solidified into something visible to the naked eye.
No wonder a fiend had suddenly wanted to reinvent itself. As a so-called divine lord, it had obtained a master's inheritance. After all, I'll keep it for now.
Soren dismissed the panel with a wave. He had gained a rich windfall of fiend lifespan, but Songzhou's situation was hardly the norm. If other prefectures were in the same state, Daqian would have fallen long ago. Frugality was the rule. This Yin Spirit technique was, at best, a choice born of necessity. And given Lady Qing's current ability, she had no strength to spare for controlling an even more powerful Yin Spirit.
If only he could lock into a Huashan realm fiend emperor.
Soren's gaze settled on the fiend origin.
Or he could feed her one of these. He would wait. This was more than 10,000 years of fiend lifespan. And unless it proved necessary, he didn't want to squander it on Qing. Better to return to the martial temple first, and see if there was anything more urgent to cultivate.
The Crimson-Eyed Demon King having ties to Qing Chu. Soren didn't much care. Qing Chu had sat on his mental list for a long time now. This only deepened the mark.
Counting what came before, 126 drops of demon blood. That should be enough.
He stowed the wooden box and the fiend core alike. Both could serve as nourishment in place of demon blood now, and there was no question of wasting them. He sat cross-legged and poured the fiend lifespan into the 9 fiend demon transformation art. This time, he was feeding the second immortal fiend.
Year 1, you merge the demon blood into your 4 limbs and 100 bones, feeding it to the Mountain Lord. It begins to devour without awareness.
The same change as before spread through the Mountain Lord. Soren lifted his robe and studied the tiger stripes spreading across his skin. The demon blood sank into that body, dyeing it an eerily vivid scarlet. At the same time, a vast power began to erupt through his frame. The demon blood drained quickly. In short order, more than 70 drops were gone, and the Mountain Lord was still absorbing.
Year 4200. The Mountain Lord's absorption slows. Its aura seems to crest an unseen peak, and the immortal flood dragon, at its side, senses it standing threatened. The great striped tiger casts an indifferent glance at the other, and swallows another drop of demon blood. Year 7400, the Mountain Lord has consumed 113 drops of demon blood. Before it, the wolf fiend Xiaoyue and the newly advanced immortal flood dragon alike are pressed flat by that ferocious presence. Your Mountain Lord's divine art has improved. Remaining fiend lifespan, 87,200 years.
Soren watched the duction come to a close. His whole body stung as if licked by flame, but the improvement was unmistakable. Even Lady Qing, back in her day, had condensed only a little over 80 drops of demon blood. Before this, the Mountain Lord had barely managed to break into the nascent pill realm. Now it had made a genuine qualitative leap. Such was the nature of fiend body, tempering arts. Crude, to be sure, but the terms were clear. You got exactly what you paid for. Once the stripes faded back beneath his skin, Soren dressed, rose, and summoned Red Cloud. From the little bell he took the breath, trace he'd casually gathered from Yangxiang earlier, following its guidance. He mounted the cloud and vanished. At the edge of Songzhou, a group waited outside the county seat. Aside from the gaunt Yangxiang, they all wore the red cloaks of the profound armor. A display this size, all for one man. None knew how long had passed. A short man in a black tunic came sprinting from afar, aura burning without restraint. At the sight of so many familiar faces, his expression flickered.
You summoned me back so suddenly, you all already know.
Not one of the last Golden Bell demon hunters in Songzhou. He clenched his jaw, his eyes filled with barely suppressed terror.
I did everything I could. I sent it spiritual treasures. But its time was nearly up, and the crimson-eyed Demon King had gravely wounded it. There is no saving it now, less than half a breath left.
As long as the white rhinoceros Demon King kept breathing, it remained a threat to the crimson-eyed Demon King. But once word spread that it had drawn its last breath, Songzhou's ruin was all but certain.
I know.
Yang Xiangxiang said with a nod.
You know.
The short man's eyes bulged. This was not the reply he had expected.
The situation they'd painstakingly built over a century was about to collapse. And this was High Marshal Valerius's reaction. Don't look so hopeless, all of you. Let's think of something else. There is always a way.
He paced frantically on the spot until Zhang Xuan seized his arm.
It is already taken care of.
Zhang Xuan spoke the quiet reassurance to his colleague. His expression complicated. The short man stood, frozen.
What do you mean?
The Imperial Inspector came in person and purged the fiends. Songzhou is free of the fiend plague. We've sent everyone to sweep the county towns, and to this moment, not a single fiend has turned up.
Zhang Xuan related it in a calm voice, yet even as the words left his lips, his own eyes held a dazed look.
The Imperial Inspector. The Imperial Inspector.
The short man staggered back several steps, as if struck by lightning. A Bodan realm expert, no less, and yet he plopped straight down onto the ground.
This sounded exactly like a street corner folktale. At the height of despair, an immortal descends from nowhere, rounds up all the wicked fiends, then gongs and drums thunder. Firecrackers crackle. A myth for common folk to comfort their families with. Absolutely not something men of the imperial court should ever believe.
And yet the words had come from his own colleague's mouth.
Everything will be all right.
Zhang Xuan reached out to pull him up, but the short man slapped his hand away and buried his face in his arm. He sat on the ground, making no sound, only trembling faintly all over. The others fell mute. A demonic cloud dropped from the sky, revealing a figure in ink-black robes. Soren walked into their midst, looking puzzled.
Is the intelligence on the Demon King I asked for ready?
Reporting to NHS Droll Shend. The intelligence you requested is currently on the ground, weeping.
Yang Xiangxiang gave a dry cough and pointed at the man on the ground.
Oh?
Soren walked over and said quietly,
Cry later, work first. He had lifespan to spare these days. What ran scarce was demon blood.
The short man stiffened on the ground, lowered his arm, and shot a resentful glare at each of his colleagues. Then he scrambled to his feet, looked at the young man before him, forced down the disbelief churning in his chest, and saluted with cupped fists.
I pay my respects, Lord Inspector.
No need for ceremony. Take me to the remaining Demon King.
Soren grabbed the back of his collar, summoned his demonic cloud, and left Songzhou behind.
Fiends regarded one another as precious elixirs. If some other creature got its hands on his demonic blood, that would be a truly bloody loss.
The short man dangled in midair like a chick, shrinking his legs in bewilderment before reaching out to point the way. At the peak of a green mountain, beneath a shroud of dense thickets, a cramped cave flickered in and out of view. Even Jade Liquid Realm fiends wouldn't deign to live in such a shabby place. The short man sighed at the entrance. Only he knew the being dwelling within was a true demon king. He hurried inside. A humanoid white rhinoceros fiend leaned weakly against a stone throne, its body no taller than an ordinary person's, even thinner than most, draped in thick beast, hide satin, eyes shut in feigned slumber, the corner of its mouth curving with a faint smile.
So they've started sending food to this king so openly now.
A dying demon king was at its most dangerous. The slightest disturbance would send it into a desperate, all-out fight for its life. Even the crimson-eyed demon king wouldn't choose to provoke it at a time like this.
You've had a hard time. All these years.
The short man kept his head low. It was almost comical. Without this demon king, Songzhou truly wouldn't have made it to today. With that, he abruptly raised his head and pointed at the white rhinoceros without hesitation.
My lord, it is this one. Who?
Before the white rhinoceros demon king could react, a figure had appeared beside it. A young man in a dark shirt had seated himself on the stone throne at some unknown moment, his right arm resting quietly on its shoulder. Then he suddenly exerted force. Crack. The white rhino head drooped limply.
All right, you can head back now.
Soren gave a slight nod. The short man smacked his lips and obediently retreated from the cave.
He had never imagined the white rhinoceros demon king would be any match for the inspector, but neither had he expected it to end so quickly. Geez, like slaughtering a chicken.
Waste.
Soren glanced at the panel.
Slain primordial chaos realm, white rhinoceros demon king. Total lifespan, 13,800 years. Remaining, lifespan, 3 years. Absorption complete.
He opened his mouth, and the entire corpse transformed into demonic blood. 59 drops.
It was actually far stronger than the Crimsonite Demon King. It seemed the myriad phenomena divine cultivation method was quite something after all. It could let a black bear win from a weaker position and pummel an elder senior, since it had cost him no effort at all. He might as well count it as a free grab.
Soren rose, stored the long-handled saber propped beside the stone throne into his storage treasure, confirmed the Demon King had been so poor it possessed nothing but a weapon and a tattered beast blanket, and strolled out of the cave. Songzhou City. Yang Xiangxiang had carefully arranged everything, then instructed the devil, suppressing generals on how to reassure the people. High Marshal Valerius though he was less than a fart before the inspector when it came to cultivation. But when it came to these troublesome details, he had no shortage of experience. After confirming there were no omissions, Yang Xiangxiang mounted a demon steed and accompanied Neastrail, Shend out of Songzhou.
Strictly speaking, having committed such a grave error, he should have been escorted back in bonds. Fortunately, Nafastral Shend was lenient. He hadn't voiced a single harsh word of reprimand, though he hadn't said anything else, either.
With the formidable stamina of the black-scaled flood dragon steed, the journey from Songzhou to Wangcheng would take less than 10 days. While the two were on the road, the Wangcheng Martial Temple welcomed a rare guest. Though cultivators in their own right, the 4 green-robed temple priests could only take the side seats. The seat of honor belonged to a man in black, and white wide-sleeved robes, a long goatee trailing down his chest.
May I ask what brings true person Cheng Qing of Xuan Guangdong to our Dashain?
Wu Daoan rose, neither servile nor overbearing.
Just wondering.
True person Chang Qing took a casual sip of hot tea, set the cup down and said in a flat voice,
Also, to inform you that a Grandmaster has unfortunately fallen.
At the first half of the sentence, the 4 priests' faces betrayed nothing. At the second, all 4 clamped their jaws. Wu Daoan's hand tightened inside his sleeve. A long silence followed. Then, coldly,
We are aware.
Da Kane had only 7 Grandmasters left in the entire realm. 1 more had been lost without explanation. And this man from Xuan Guangdong wore an expression as undisturbed as still water, not even bothering to offer a reason.
If there is nothing else, we shall take our leave.
They styled themselves crude martial artists, but every disciple of the martial temple knew the truth. The temple stood with the primordial chaos grandmasters, brothers in arms guarding Daxian, together. How could they not be furious? Yet they could not show it. The slightest offense to Xuanguang would only invite further injustice upon the Grandmasters out there. Wu Daoan turned and walked toward the door.
Wait.
True person Chang Qing raised a palm.
I was entrusted by a friend to ask you about a young acquaintance.
The priests halted and looked back.
My friend is an elder of Qingchu. He had 2 disciples out on training journeys, and one of them vanished in Daxian.
Shang Qing arched an eyebrow.
Do you have any word on the matter?
Wu Dao unweighed his answer, then spoke.
We know nothing of it. If you require aid in the search, we will do our utmost send men across the 9 provinces to investigate.
Thank you. But there is no need to trouble the martial temple disciples.
True person Cheng Xing smiled faintly and produced a jade slip.
That elder's senior disciple has already gathered the information for you. The place where his junior brother disappeared is Azure Province, Yangon Commandery. He sent a letter to Marshal Veritas Zhang Yian, and the reply he received. Don't know. Not clear. Ask the Martial Temple.
As his words landed, edged with amusement, Wu Daoan's eyelid twitched twice.
That Jiang kid. He really had that much backbone.
Qingchu has never held a grievance with our tripartite alliance. In fact, they're one of the allies Xuan Guangdong most wants to win over. I hope the Martial Temple can understand. We do this so that Dashine's grandmasters may be kept safer.
True person Chang Qing rose, setting the jade slip on the table.
The senior disciple has already investigated nearly everything. At the time, only 3 martial artists above the core condensation realm were passing through Northcliff. 2 were far too weak to threaten the Qingchu disciple. As for the 3rd, the information is too scant, as if he appeared out of thin air. I ask you to bring this person to me, so I may give my old friend an account. Qingchu will investigate the details. If he truly has no connection to the matter, I will naturally see him return to Dashi again.
The temple keepers listened to the end, their fury mounting with every word.
Granted, Qingchu had always kept to its neutrality, but at the end of the day, they were nothing more than a den of Zari. Dashen had already shown mercy by refusing to provoke them. For them to send someone all the way here, to demand an explanation, the insolence was insufferable. In Dachen's heyday, when the Empire said one, would Qingchu dare say two? Let alone a mere disciple, even if an elder of theirs were cut down. So what?
Wu Dao and drew a deep breath.
May I ask who the true person is looking for?
True person Chang Qing glanced at the jade slip on the table, brushed it with his divine sense, and looked up.
Azure Province Soren.
The name landed, leaving the other 3 temple keepers utterly bewildered. Wu Daoan, however, went still. Then a cold smile crept across his face, killing intent swirling in his clouded eyes.
Does the true person dare say that again? Who is it you are asking for? Allah!
A faint sense of wrongness pricked at true person Cheng Qing, but he set it aside without concern.
A martial temple on the verge of death. What waves could it possibly stir to think this man dared address him with such menace? He had clearly stewed inside this broken shrine far too long. His wits had long since curdled.